Shalom everybody, and welcome back to our class in Rav Noson's Likutey Halakhot, section Orach Chaim, the discourse on the blessings of giving thanks, Birkat Hoda'ah, discourse number 6, which again is based on Likutey Moharan lesson 24. We left off in paragraph 25. Rav Noson is breaking down piece by piece, verse by verse, word by word even, the whole story of Yaakov's encounter with the angel of Esav and the battle, the wrestling match between Yaakov and Esav's angel. And we said earlier that the main goal of the angel was to lahapil, to bring down Yaakov, and in doing so, there was avak. There was a lot of dust rising from the battle, and avak is the idea of sadness and depression. Because when something is sad, or a person is very sad, he's lethargic and doesn't move. And that's the idea that avak, dust accumulates on a person when he's not moving and he's heavy. And that was the whole idea of the battle of Esav's angel attacking Yaakov even before facing Esav, is the idea of how the evil forces are trying to bring down the Jewish people to sadness. And this is what he was trying to attempt on Yaakov Avinu, who was the main representation of the time of the Jewish people. From him comes forth the 12 tribes, etc. So he was being attacked with sadness, believe it or not. That's the idea of the wrestling attempt of the angel. But we're going to see in the Torah, and Rav Nosson explains it, that he underestimated the power of Yaakov. Yaakov had a supernatural power to fight against sadness and depression, so that the angel couldn't even attempt to bring him down. It didn't work because of his stature. So let's take a look how Rav Nosson opens up this part of the story. The verse is from Bereshit, chapter 32, verse 26. Okay? Vayar ki lo yacholo. The whole verse reads, let's take a look. Vayar ki lo yacholo, and the angel saw. It's an amazing thing. What did he see? Why didn't the verse write, and he understood, or just go to the fact? And the angel lo yachal, he couldn't stand up to Yaakov. Let's just read the verse though. Vayar ki lo yacholo, and the angel saw that he couldn't master over Yaakov. Lo yacholo, he couldn't bring him down, he couldn't subdue him. So what did he do? Vayiga bechaf yerecho. So he hit Yaakov in his thigh, which we'll go into in later classes. But teka kaf yerech Yaakov, and Yaakov's kaf yerech, the side of his waist got stuck, which is basically the idea of the sciatic nerve in the wrong place. Be'aveko imo, in his attempt to bring him down and elevate the dust on him, and the battling that made the ma'avak. In Hebrew, the term for someone who's fighting and challenging someone is called the ma'avak, from the language of avak, which means dust. So now the midrash on this verse, vayar ki lo yacholo, and the angel saw with his eyes that he couldn't. What did he see? So the midrash says two things. Number one, that he saw the divine presence resting over Yaakov Avinu. So the angel began to shake. The divine presence of Hashem over Yaakov Avinu. So it's like someone is battling the prince, the son of the king, and all of a sudden the king is standing over the prince while the other person is trying to oppose him. So he's like scared against the king, so he stops and he nullifies himself. That's one thing. And he saw that Yaakov had the merit of 5 ancestors protecting him. He had Avram, Yitzchak, and Sarah, and Rivka, and his own merit. 5 to 1. So he saw that it wasn't, and the angel came with the strength of Esav only, with the merit of Esav, as if to say, because Esav didn't have the merits of his ancestors because he didn't follow their ways. He was evil. But Yaakov was following the ways of Avram, Yitzchak, and Sarah, and Rivka, so he has their merit sticking to him, making it the ratio 5 to 1. Once it was 5 to 1, that's what subdued the angel. Okay? So now Rav Nosson though explains it like this. Vayar ki lo yacholo. So the angel saw that he couldn't bring down Yaakov. Something amazing Rav Nosson brings out. Ki keneged Yaakov be'atzmo ein lo shum koach. Because against Yaakov himself, the angel has no strength. Whether it's like the Midrash says, because the Shekhinah over him, divine presence, or it's the merit of the four ancestors adding to Yaakov, making all him stronger. So he has no strength at all. He has no way to even enter, no like crack to get in to bring down Yaakov. Kaya kadosh v'tahor me'od b'kedushat habrit. Rav Nosson explains what was the power of Yaakov, his holiness and purity in sexual matters. His sexual purity in the guarding of the covenant was so strong. Rabbi Nachman teaches this point many places, and Rav Nosson also, that the mastery and power of tzaddikim to have strength over evil is specifically in the area of the covenant. I recall a story I heard about Rav Velvel, Rav Binyamin Zev Cheshen, that he was once, as a little child, he grew up in the old city of Jerusalem. He was born in the old city of Jerusalem. We're talking about like the 1900s, early 1900s. And once he was by the Kotel, the Western Wall, davening with his grandfather. And on the way back, it was back then, obviously the times were still primitive and early, and there wasn't like organized streets and roads, and there was a lot of openings for mishappenings and even wild animals. So he said that while walking back home with his grandfather, a pack of dogs, wild dogs, tried to attack him, and he got very scared. And his grandfather said to him, "Hold on to my belt. Hold on to my belt." He held on to his belt, and the dogs didn't touch him. They were barking, but they stopped barking, and they didn't touch him at all. So his grandfather indicated to him, when someone has holiness, kedushat habrit, so the dogs can't touch him. And he held on to his belt, as he's saying, hold on here, dafka, specifically here, because the idea of the belt is around the area of the loins, which is where the covenant is, the sexual organ. He said, whoever has this thing, purity, in this area, the dogs can't touch him. And it's an amazing idea that the purity of the person, which makes him deemed a tzaddik, because the Gemara, the Zohar says, what's the definition of a tzaddik? Someone who guards the covenant. And that's the protection, that's the shield of a tzaddik. So here Rav Nosson's pointing that the reason why the angel couldn't get in to bring Yaakov to sadness and depression, because he was holding on such a high level of purity of the covenant, and that is ultimately connected one with simcha. Watch. And Yaakov had no blemish at all in this area of the blemish covenant, that from there comes all sadness. Because sadness and depression, a person feels empty and lacking, and he just wants to fill himself up. And the idea of sexual pleasure is a person feels very empty and in need of that enjoyment, which is only temporarily, and a person feels it fills him up, but really doesn't. He feels even more empty afterwards because of the damage caused of wasting seed, etc. So sadness really comes from this blemish of the covenant. That's one of the main areas that causes a person to be sad and depressed, is that when he wastes his seed or does sexual transgressions, making him to feel even more empty, and draws upon him sadness and depression. Kayadua, as is known. So by Yaakov, because he had such a high level of purity, the angel had no way to get in to try to bring him down to Atzvut. Va'al ken be'emet zacha shehu etzem asimcha etzem ha'emet. So Rav Nosson now adds another detail to what he said earlier in this paragraph that we mentioned in previous classes, that because of Yaakov's high level of purity, of holiness, the Torah illustrates that, by the way, that when Yaakov came to bless Reuven before he passed away, he said about Reuven, which is his first son, Reshit Oni, you are my first drop of seed, of semen. Reshit Oni. When did Yaakov have Reuven? When he was 70 something, he had Reuven. And he's saying he's his first drop. So the rabbis show from here that Yaakov had such a high level of sexual purity, he had no emission at all for over 70 years. His first actual drop of seed was his son Reuven. that illustrates a high level of moral purity and moral standards. And the Rav Nosson saying, so because of that, there's no room for sadness to come in. So therefore, in truth, he was zoche, Yaakov was zoche, to be, because of his high level of guarding the covenant, the essence of joy and the essence of truth that we mentioned earlier are connected. Truth and joy, Rabbi Nachman brings in lesson 23, and Rav Nosson quoted that, are intertwined, are interdependent. The joy and truth, when a person connects to the point of truth of his Yiddishkeit, there's no greater joy than that. When a person is in line with, and like I said, he's deriving life force from his point of truth, which is the holiness that Hashem has engraved in the DNA of every Jew, and from that point he can connect to God to the highest of levels. This is the greatest joy. You have access to the greatest of levels just by the fact that you have a point of truth within you that Hashem wants you to connect to that point of truth, and through that is your gateway to Hashem. There's no greater joy than that. You don't have to go looking elsewhere. Everything's within your reach in order to connect to the highest of levels. So there's no greater joy than that. And he's adding the dimension here of Nosson, that this is dependent on guarding the covenant. Because someone guards the covenant shows that he has no lacking, and he has no opening for sadness to attack him. So ultimately it comes in. What's going to come out of this discourse is Rav Nosson is going to show why a person needs a tzaddik in his life. The person himself may be blemished, but if he works to attach himself to tzaddikim who have mastered the covenant, and because of that they're the master of joy and truth, so then even if a person himself has major deficiencies in these areas, if he attaches himself to people, tzaddikim, who are of that caliber, they're holding at the level of the covenant and joy and truth, it brushes off on a person eventually. If he holds on and follows the directives and listens to the tzaddikim and has complete faith in what they're saying as being correct and right and their guidelines, and also believes in their merit and their power of prayer to help a person, this eventually brushes off, which is what Rav Nosson is going to get to. And that's why the Torah is telling us that he couldn't, that the angel couldn't subdue him. Because against the tzaddikim, they have no chance, no way in to bring them down because of the high level of mastery of holiness. When we see tzaddikim suffer and die on Kiddush Hashem, that's for another thing. That's to help atone the Jewish people, where the tzaddikim accept to fall that low. But normally in battling, in becoming a tzaddik, and also in using the force of being a tzaddikim, they're not scared of all of the evil forces at all. We should be zochet to have the merit of connecting to the tzaddikim and drawing from their holiness and their joy and their truth, and that should come onto us. B'ezrat Hashem. We'll continue soon in the next class on the following idea of hitting the sciatic nerve of Yaakov, what that signifies. Again, this class is based on Likutey Moharan lesson 24. For more on this lesson, you can go to lesson 24 .breslov BRESLOV therapy.com. And again, if you'd like to support our work in trying to spread Rabbi Nachman's teachings in a therapeutic format of healing, self-healing, you can donate at donate.breslovtherapy.com. Thank you so much. Have an amazing week, and Shabbat Shalom.